Almost every pop star reaches a point in their career where they make an album about the burdens and pressures that come with being famous, what I have deemed the Fame Sucks album. Fame is of course a profound concept woven into almost anything most pop stars write and sing about to some degree, but what's interesting to me is when an entire album centrally revolves around what it means to be famous. Fame is glorious but excruciating. The spotlight is mesmerizing, but it also shines light on every insecurity and flaw. There is so much to unpack with the concept, especially for pop stars who are very, very famous. Oftentimes, you can tell if an album's central concept and theme is about fame based on the starting and the ending tracks of the album. Like I said, many albums by famous people will talk about fame at some point, but you'll know that's the main takeaway if that's what the album starts and ends on, because that wraps the entire story. That's what the artist wants to kick the story off with and leave you with at the end. An example of this, in my opinion, is Ariana Grande. Being one of the most famous pop stars of our generation, she has touched on fame many times in her career, but I wouldn't consider any single album of hers to be a Fame Sucks album, because that's never really the central takeaway. There's no central message about fame. It's kind of always a metaphor for something else. The closest she comes, in my opinion, is on Thank You Next and Eternal Sunshine, but again, discussions of fame tend to be isolated to specific songs, Fake Smile and True Story respectively. But when you look at the start and end of these albums and the overall stories being told, they still ultimately revolve around something else, love, relationships, introspection. Thank You Next centers imagination, wonder, healing from trauma, while Eternal Sunshine centers self-discovery and truth. And fame is a vehicle to tell those stories, but not the crux of it. Another great example recently is Addison Rae. Her debut contained one of the most iconic Fame Sucks songs of the year, Fame is a Gun. But ultimately, the album centers Addison's journey of glamour, youth. Less so about fame, I would say, and more just like what it means to live a glamorous life while also being sad and melancholy, kind of like Brat. And so today we're going to go through some of my favorite Fame Sucks albums where the central theme and storyline is some commentary on fame. And I'll focus especially on the opening and closing tracks to help show why, along with what I think the artist is trying to say about fame. These are some of my favorites, but of course, there are many more out there, so feel free to let me know down below some of your favorites. But let's get started with...
They sing for the best. My reputation's never been worse, so you must like me for me.
Of course, we have to start with Reputation, one of the most noteworthy Fame Sucks albums, and one that has definitely inspired many others. I mean, this is where the idea of eras was born, the Reputation era being coined for comebacks. Whatever you think about Taylor Swift, especially her recent attempt to maybe bring back Reputation-esque vibes, you can't deny the absolute cinema of this album. And what's really fascinating is how, at its core, this is actually a love album, but it's wrapped in this Reputation badass aesthetic because it's a combination of both of those ideas. It's about her budding romance with Joe Alwyn, her boyfriend at the time, but how that romance succeeded through secrecy, privacy, through being away from the spotlight, through this person seeing her not for her public perception, but for who she really is. Those ideas are woven throughout all of the love songs on this album, and the rapping, again, the opening and closing tracks, come back to those ideas of fame and how can you have successful relationships when every single thing you do has a spotlight on it. That's the theme of this album, and it's told beautifully. This is made most clear by the opening track, Ready for It. The verses touch on all these different aspects of Reputation. Knew he was a killer first time that I saw him. Knew I was a robber first time that he saw me. These are what these people are known for. The chorus, though, brings us to a place of love. In the middle of the night, in my dreams, you should see the things we do. It's when you put away the spotlight, when you put away the real world entirely, you can have a successful relationship. Something beautiful can bloom out. Another track that makes this very explicit is Delicate. This ain't for the best. My reputation's never been worse, so he must like me for me. That's the entire theme of this album. So yes, while most of the songs are love songs, they're all bundled in this idea of reputation. They're bundled in Taylor's own perspective on love at this point in her career and what she's trying to tell us in this album. The final tracks really sum this up. Call It What You Want. Kind of similar to Ready for It, talking about reputation in various ways. My castle crumbled overnight. All the drama queens taking swings. All the jokers dressing up as kings. They fade to nothing when I look at him. Again, how this relationship is all that matters to her right now, and she doesn't care about the fame anymore. She doesn't care what people think. And New Year's Day takes that loving aspect of it and just runs all the way with it. So yeah, one of the most iconic Fame Sucks albums of all time is really just a giant love story. And you'll notice this with a lot of artists and how they explore fame. Usually fame is kind of an opposing force to love, because when you're famous, when you have every single thing you do looked at and scrutinized by the public, it's impossible to build a genuine, private, meaningful relationship. Now, Reputation came out in 2017, and we're going to jump ahead in time to post-COVID 2021, because a lot of albums came out that year that really, really honed in on this Fame Sucks theme. The reason being that during the pandemic, artists were forced to take a break from their own fame. They couldn't tour, see fans, or do any sort of publicity, and that quarantining definitely produced lots of ruminations on a life before fame and what these artists maybe long for, what they wish they could go back to. So we'll see that in the next few.
Under the chemtrails, over the country club.
Chemtrails Over the Country Club is Lana Del Rey's 6th studio album, coming after the major success of Norman fucking Rockwell, arguably Lana Del Rey's magnum opus, and a variety of public controversies, mainly the notorious Question for the Culture post. Lana has always been a somewhat elusive, controversial figure in the public eye since the very beginning of her career. Her glamorization of Americana, dating older men who don't treat you well, these ideas in her music have been subjected to heavy criticism from people claiming that she's setting women back and she's not a good role model. However, the way Lana sees it, she's just communicating an experience through art. That doesn't mean she agrees with it or is promoting other girls to do it. This is simply her lived experience that she should be willing to share. That's the sentiment she tried to get across in her Question for the Culture post, but she ended up coming off too much as white woman alligator tears more than anything, which just led to even more controversy. So it's no surprise that with COVID and Lana likely returning home, away from the public eye, she conjured this album all about what her life would be like if she never became famous, if she remained in the country club. We get the story set up clearly on the opening track, White Dress. Lana narrates how she started off as just a waitress, desperate to become famous, going to conferences as a young adult, trying to make a name for herself, feeling fame take hold of her like a godly kind of power. But she ruminates on if all of that was worth it in the first place. What would her life look like if she wasn't famous? And then we get the titular track where Lana vividly takes us into that exact life, getting coffee at school, driving little red sports cars, doing laundry. It's serene, it's peaceful. She's not saying that she would choose this life. In fact, on White Dress, she says she would still choose the fame route if she could go back. It's simply a rumination on what that life would look like. That's kind of the beauty of the COVID era Fame Sucks album. Instead of just telling us fame sucks, we get vivid imagery of what a life without fame would look like. And that's the central theme that guides a lot of the remaining songs on this album. Wild at Heart is another one of my favorite songs on this album because, again, it just ruminates on what life would look like without fame, but how Lana still kind of is drawn to it because she loves the people it's brought her to. The closing track, For Free, is a beautiful full circle moment back to White Dress. For Free is actually a cover of a Joni Mitchell song, but Lana Del Rey executes it beautifully here at the end of the album to wrap up the story about fame. The song follows a musician who is playing on the street, who isn't famous, but is doing it for the love of music. And it ties beautifully to White Dress, where again, Lana is ruminating on when she was that musician, just playing her songs, trying to get people's attention to where she is now. It's such a fabulous story. As someone famous, it's hard to give that up. You're one of the chosen ones. You have all the attention. You have kind of everything that most people dream of having. But it's still interesting to wonder what it would be like to not have that. And that's exactly what Chemtrails Over the Country Club gives us.
Blink 3 times when you feel it kicking in that slow.
Released later in 2021, we have Solar Power by Lorde, her 3rd studio album, and very much like Chemtrails, it was a departure from her normal work. It was very much just a rumination on fame and what a life would look like without fame. Now, Lorde herself said about this album that for a while she had been trying to separate the two versions of herself, the famous version and the at-home real version of herself. And Solar Power is an album entirely ditching the famous self and just being the real version of herself. And we see that in the music as well. Lorde ditched the loud maximalist electropop sound of melodrama and turned toward a much more acoustic, peaceful sound. There is a sunniness present throughout this album, which is, of course, a literal representation of the album's themes and sounds. You know, she even touches on climate change at multiple points in the album. But it's also just a metaphor for what life away from the spotlight looks like. When you're not in the big city, when you're not on stage, you can just take in nature and scenery. As she says in the title track, I throw my cellular device in the water. Can you reach me? No, you can't. It's about seclusion and life away from fame. Again, very, very similar to Chemtrails. The opening track, The Path, gives us this appreciation for the sun very explicitly, while also beginning to introduce those themes of fame. Teen millionaire having nightmares from the camera flash. She's trying to set up how she wants to depart away from the trauma and perception that comes with fame, and the sun is how she's going to do that. And then Solar Power, the title track, really just runs with that idea and takes it to its fullest. And that's what this whole album is going to be about. She keeps the sunny acoustic sound while diving into all these different ways that fame has distorted her, has put her through the ringer, and how she's just kind of tired of it. Oceanic Feeling closes out the album on thoughts of family and once again living life away from fame. I really love the line, "It's a blue day," being kind of the opening and running motif of the song, because blue is commonly associated with sadness, and that is the poster color of melodrama, a very emotionally chaotic album. Meanwhile here, it's a representation of peacefulness, the ocean, the blue skies. Blue is now a color of nature. The cherry black lipstick's gathering dust in the drawer. She's ditching the old persona from pure heroine and melodrama for this newer, freer life, and she loves it. At least that's what she portrayed on this album. Now, as we know, she wasn't entirely happy at this point, and we got more of that on Virgin, which I've talked about before. But I think Solar Power was a really necessary album for her to just put this down. And, you know, it's not Lorde's best, but that's a really high bar to clear. It's still a really good album. It's definitely overhated. I think it's the perfect vibe for when you just need that, like, sunny, joyful, peaceful aesthetic. Now we're going to talk about a couple albums that similarly were post-COVID, but more so touch on the manipulation and perception that accompanies fame. So kind of just the most essential version of the fame sucks concept you can think of. And interestingly, these next couple albums were actually their artists' respective sophomore albums, coming right after massive, massive debuts that got tons of critical acclaim, but with that, a lot of public perception that took a huge mental health toll on them. So we're going to see how they touch on that.
Just fucking leave me alone.
The first of these is Happier Than Ever by Billie Eilish, which actually also came out in 2021, around when Solar Power came out. So in a way, it's a post-COVID Fame Sucks album, but I group it more in the sophomore Fame Sucks category, if we're doing categories like I'm saying. The reason being that it doesn't really touch on a life before fame. It kind of just delves into the issues with fame itself. The constant self-doubt, perception, and the manipulation that comes with being famous. After the runaway success of When We All Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go?, Billie's debut album, which swept the Big Four at the Grammys, a very, very hard thing to do, there was a lot of burden and expectation placed onto Billie's shoulders, and that eventually led to Happier Than Ever. This album was heavily inspired by COVID, but again, it's less about returning to a place before fame, but rather ruminating on what fame itself has created. You can tell a lot from how the album starts and ends. The start here is getting older, which I think in a way is kind of like an abstract for the album. It's telling us what we're going to get into. The album is largely a journey of growing up, but in particular, what it means to grow up in the spotlight. You have to consider Billie Eilish's runaway fame came when she was like 17, 18 years old. That is a very, very young age to become so famous. And so as she's just undergoing typical maturing and development, she's also handling all these massive expectations. And that is really beautifully encapsulated in Getting Older. I'm happier than ever, at least that's my endeavor, to keep myself together and prioritize my pleasure. She's having to learn how to prioritize herself above the fame, above people's perception of her. And that's the journey that we take in this album. My Future sees one such attempt. I'm in love, but not with anybody here. I'll see you in a couple years. A means of escaping the spotlight. We have Goldwing, a song inspired by Olivia Rodrigo's rise to fame, and Billy's own understanding of that, being in the exact same situation. Happier Than Ever came out around when Olivia was having her big break with Sour. More on that soon. You guys get where I'm going, right? Not My Responsibility is a spoken word track directly ruminating on other people's perception of her and how she shouldn't be held accountable to unrealistic standards. NDA dives into confidentiality and loneliness as a pop star. Of course, the titular track touches on internet hate. Then we get the closing track, Male Fantasy, which tries to resolve all these feelings. I take Male Fantasy to really be about depression more than anything else, which is made really clear by the music video, and how easy it is to get caught in loneliness, fatigue, and regret. But of course, the title still has to do with perception. She would never be that satisfied. It's a male fantasy. Billie is still rebelling against what others want her to be. That is still the crux of this album. So that is Billie Eilish's story of fame sucking, and a truly, truly powerful one at that. I don't know why. This album always has been a comfort album for me. It's not afraid to be personal and weird and experimental, and I just love that about it. The journey is clear, but there's so much you can take from it and so much that you can put into it, how you can relate your own life experiences, which is just a testament to Billie Eilish's artistry and songwriting.
Bleed me dry like a goddamn vampire.
Now, as I hinted, an album very similar to Happier Than Ever is Guts by Olivia Rodrigo, her sophomore album that came out in 2023 after the major success of Sour. These songs became some of the biggest songs of 2021, 2022. Every single person knows Driver's License, everyone knows Good For You. This album was unavoidable. And of course, because she became so famous so fast, as she's growing up, as she's still very young, that's not a normal experience. There's a lot of baggage that comes with it, very similar to Billie Eilish. And Guts has songs about relationships, but like I said, you can deduce a lot from the starting and ending songs, and neither of those are about relationships. They're explicitly about growing up and being perceived, a direct consequence of the massive fame that Olivia stumbled upon. All American Bitch, the opening track, sets that up in this really sarcastic, clever, powerful way, describing all these things Olivia is, how she's the perfect woman in the public eye. I don't get angry when I'm pissed. I'm the eternal optimist. She is the person that everyone wants her to be. And then the bridge is kind of like a breakdown of that, you know? I scream inside to deal with it, and then she actually does scream and let it out. And what I really love about this song is it gets at something unique that I don't think these other albums really touch on. The idea of gratitude. All the time, I'm grateful all the time. There's a lot of ways to control fame, but it is kind of a game of luck. There are tons and tons of talented people out there, but how is it decided who gets chosen to be the next big pop star that everyone is listening to and everyone is talking about, right? And I think that we put a lot of pressure on celebrities to be grateful for that. But I find it interesting that a lot of recent pop stars are kind of saying fuck you to that. Like, they're famous, they acknowledge that, they're grateful for fans and people who support them, but there's still a lot of pressure and manipulation that comes with being famous. These artists are saying, why should we be grateful for that? Why should we accept that and say that it's okay? A big example of that is Chappell Roan, who has created a lot of heat for herself by, again, rebelling against the idea that just because she's famous, she has to accept all the shit that people put her through, all the manipulation, all the ogling. But I think she's doing good work by rebelling against those ideas, and we see that here on All American Bitch and throughout this album as well. Other songs delve into relationships on the album, but there's a couple key ideas that Olivia really focuses on in Guts: self-sabotage and manipulation. Whether it's herself on Bad Idea Right, or Ballad of a Homeschooled Girl, or other people on Vampire, Logical, The Grudge, she details all these different ways she keeps getting taken advantage of, or how despite being on top, being this perfect pop star all-American girl, she's still losing and fumbling. This is made explicitly clear on Making the Bed, which is, in my opinion, the most quintessential fame sucks song Olivia has ever released, and one of the best out there. It is the perfect way to voice all those feelings while acknowledging that it was her own doing. She wanted to become famous. She dreamed of this. She achieved those dreams, but now she has to live with that. Sometimes I feel like I don't want to be where I am, but it's me who's been making the bed. It is Brilliant. Finally, the album closes on two final songs about perception and burden. Pretty Isn't Pretty delves into self-image and never being able to live up to expectations. And Teenage Dream details all of Olivia's fears that her fame is effectively coming to an end as she ages, which is crazy to think at 19, but the whole album validates those concerns. So much is expected of her, and if things keep going wrong, whether she's messing up or whether people are manipulating her, she's worried that soon there won't be anyone left who still cares. They all say that it gets better, but what if I don't? So beyond just saying that fame sucks, Olivia is really focusing on the expectation associated with fame and how those expectations can be crushing. She wants to make mistakes. She wants to scream out the pain, but isn't allowed to. And that's a really beautiful thing that she explores here. Guts is just that girl. Like, this album really gets me through the hard times and speaks to me on a very, very personal level. So thank you, Olivia Rodrigo, for that.
Tie me up, pull my strings and make me sing like oh.
The last album I want to touch on in this album is a very recent one, actually, that came out a few months ago, Adele's Provocateur. Now, if you keep up with Cat's Eye and Dream Academy, or if you've just seen her promoting her stuff online, you may be familiar with who Adele is. She is a singer, dancer, performer, and she kind of rose to fame with her being a member of Popstar Dream Academy, the reality TV show that formed Cat's Eye, the new global girl group phenomenon who you've definitely heard of. Don't pretend like you haven't. And if you need more backstory on that, I made a whole video about them that you should check out. But anyways, Adele was one of the girls on the show. Not only was she one of the most talented trainees and performers there, she was also loved by all of the other girls. She was caring, she was friendly, and as one of the older members there, she was effectively a mother. But when social media was introduced as a factor and Adele plummeted in the rankings due to factors out of her control, she was reasonably upset. She was one of the only ones to call out Manon for skipping practices, and ultimately a lot of Cat's Eye fans kind of turned against her, calling her a mean girl. Regardless, Adele has been through a lot, from ballet training as a child and, of course, Popstar Dream Academy. She has always been scrutinized. The main reason she got booted off of Dream Academy was because she stood out too much. She was a solo performer more than a group performer, and that is especially clear from her new album, Provocateur, where she really does shine as a solo performer. And this album is very explicitly about all the different baggage and manipulation and scrutiny that has come with this sudden rise to fame, with the way she was portrayed on Dream Academy and what people think of her versus who she actually is. Again, the dichotomy between the famous you and the real you. I liken it a lot to Guts and Happier Than Ever. Being so early in her career, she is already being scrutinized to such an extreme amount, and this album is just rebelling against that. It's saying, I don't care, I'm going to be provocative, I'm going to be myself, and the media is going to make me out to create drama and create entertainment value, but if you want to get to know the real me, here it is. And that's what makes Adele shine so much as a solo performer. She is unafraid to embrace the things that make her unique. The songs on this album delve into that in various ways, but again, the opening and closing tracks make it very clear the overall takeaway message here. With Superscar, she talks about manipulation, tie me up, pull my strings, and make me sing. How this industry that she loves, that she wants to be a part of, is very manipulative, it's very taxing. And then the final track, called Finally Apologizing, is her, guess what, not apologizing. You won't get what you want from me. That's the main lyric, and like I said, that's kind of the idea here. Regardless of how the media portrays her, regardless of the expectations that people put on her, she is not going to cave in. She's going to be herself. It kind of pulls a lot of messages from these other albums we've seen, and it's a really powerful way to kick off your career. I mean, again, this is her debut album, and she's right off the bat, she's saying fuck you to the industry. She's saying, I'm going to do me. I liken this album a lot to Jade's That's Showbiz Baby, which I did talk about recently in my Showgirl concept video. Jade's album is also about how fame sucks, the expectations, the manipulation, the burden associated with it, just like all these other albums we've been talking about. The reason I find it similar, though, is because of the sound, actually, which is one of my favorite things about The Provocateur. It's creative, it's loud, it's brash, and it's unafraid to try new things, which is what I loved about Jade's album, and it's what I love about Adele's as well. This is one of the most creative sounding projects I've heard all year, and I'm obsessed with every single song on this album. There are no skips here. So if you haven't listened to Adele's debut, you definitely need to, and you definitely need to keep up with her. She is a rising star in the making, there's no doubt. So those are some of my favorite Fame Sucks albums, and that's going to wrap up this video. Let me know down below any albums you thought of that are related, any thoughts you had. Sorry I've been gone for so long. I do want to do kind of a year-end ranking albums of 2025 video soon as we approach the new year, which is crazy. But that's going to be all for this one. I'll see you soon. Bye!